What's up, champs? Welcome to the Keeping Karlsson Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Another edition on this lovely, lovely Tuesday evening. I am your host, Ben Burnett, and joining me, as always, your other host, Louis Ezekiel. Louis, my friend, how are you doing on this Tuesday that I referred to earlier?
Yeah, it's a fine Tuesday. Excited to, get some fantasy hockey action. I can care about hockey this week because I'm not instantly in an enormous hole. Last week was it was kind of relaxing. It was kind of, I felt like I wanted to be excited when my players scored, but I was like, it's kind of meaningless. It was kind of a nihilistic week for me.
Well, welcome back to the land of the annihilators. I'm trying to come up with a anti-nihilism reference, but I don't care about philosophy, and I'm sure I'm not alone in saying that. Louis, we've picked up a bit of we're going for a bit of a format shift tonight. We're not doing the usual headlines and injuries, outjuries section at the beginning, and we're not looking at streaks in the second half. Instead, we are kind of looking generally at some players who have had some strong performances lately, some hot streaks and cold streaks, kind of focusing the whole show around the streak section. And I guess why don't you explain sort of what we're hoping to do as we discuss all of these players?
Yeah, the idea here is we want to talk about some of these players and also think about, how can we maximize our benefit from them? Are they guys that you just want to hold on to? Do you want to fish around for a trade? Do you want to offer to try and grab somebody off one of these? And it kind of opened the door for us not only to talk about the players who are on those streaks, but also those players who we see as being similar enough or in the same area that you could try and make a trade. And incidentally, then we get to talk about those players as well. So I think it'll be interesting. I hope people will enjoy it. Obviously, you can let us know at ShortShiftsKK on Twitter or in the Discord if you are a patron of the show. And let's go ahead and get started. I want to talk about one of the hottest streaks we've got going right now, which is Andrei Kuzmenko, who has just been going off. 3 goals, 6 assists in the last 5 games for 9 total points. Only one of those came on the power play. Kind of interesting because I think that relative lack of power play success is sort of what we've been expecting from Kuzmenko as he starts to regress to the mean. His even strength stats look pretty sustainable, aside from a bit of an inflated on-ice shooting percentage at 13%. Maybe not even that inflated. Just, the chemistry he's found with Elias Pettersson has been strong enough maybe that, we could expect them to shoot a little bit above average. But the red flag is on the power play where he's been absolutely bananas and unsustainably so. Kuzmenko scored 5 times on 12 shots for 41% shooting, and we can't expect for him to keep producing at that clip on the man advantage. He's doubling his individual expected goals on the power play. So I would expect we would continue to see kind of this tailing off on the power play. As we mentioned, only one of those 6 assists has been on the power play and none of the goals over that 5-game streak. The good news, I suppose, is that he's not getting any even strength or much in the way of even strength red flags as he racks up points next to EP40. So if you have him, I actually would just continue to ride him unless you think you could sell high on him in a league that counts power play points. So maybe they give an extra point for it or it's a separate category. That might be an area where you could reap a benefit by trading him rather than holding him. And I thought someone maybe to target would be someone like Alex DeBrincat. ADBC is averaging about 1.5 points fewer fantasy points per game over the last month than Kuzmenko. This is in cupful scoring, which does not count anything extra for power play points. But basically, we're looking at AK96 overperforming with less ice time. DeBrincat is averaging around, Kuzmenko's maximum, and DeBrincat's minimum ice time is around Kuzmenko's average, if that makes sense. So, we're seeing generally DeBrincat getting more ice time. He's also shooting about half of his career shooting percentage, and half of last year's shooting percentage. So I feel like he's likely to rebound a bit there. So I like Alex DeBrincat as someone maybe that you could dangle Kuzmenko in front of the DeBrincat owner and maybe get a bite.
So we're talking here, I guess, both a sell high and a buy low opportunity is how you're looking at this one.
Yeah, I would guess that you would be able to get more out of DeBrincat for the remainder of the season. He's not likely to kind of run into a wall the way we might see with a young player like Kuzmenko. He's unlikely to be, shifted out of the top 6 at all if he, even if he goes on an extended cold streak. The only issue is that, DeBrincat has been on a mini hot streak himself with 3 points in the last 3 games. It might have been, a better chance to go after him, maybe a few days ago. But obviously Kuzmenko still with that streak that he's on has got to be pretty appealing.
Yeah, I really like Kuzmenko right now. I mean, if you have him, you probably got him off the waiver wire, in which case I just think that you kind of want to hold on to that found money and see where it goes. I don't really see a reason why he needs to cool off too much. I mean, I hear you on the power play. Certainly, I don't expect him to shoot 40% over 80 games, but I don't know. It's like he's a KHL superstar who's come over and is now playing on getting great deployment with great players. I could see him just being a very, could he not be a 75 to 80 point player? I guess it wouldn't shock me is where I'm at.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, he's probably found money in your league. So I definitely understand the urge to just sort of say, hey, I got this guy for nothing and look what he's done for me.
All right, Lewis, I'm going to go over to another hot streak, this time in Buffalo. I want to talk about Jeff Skinner, a player that I did discuss a little bit with Elon last week, but Skinner has just remained incredible for another week. 5 goals and 8 points in his last 4 games, now up to 22 points in 22 games this year. Obviously a point per game, 82-point pace over a full season. Which would be a big deal for Skinner. He's never exceeded a 65-point pace in his life since joining the NHL, of course. Obviously, when you look under the hood, you might guess that based on how hot he's been lately, there are some, on ice and individual rate percentages that are a touch high for our boy Jeffy Skins. But I think if you were drafting again today, Skinner deserves to go much higher than he was preseason, where he was kind of getting drafted in that like 140 to 150 range. Without thinking about it too hard, I would say he's probably now a top 75 to 80 fantasy player. Part of that is, the shot floor. He's kind of the classic example of a guy who he's going to rank ahead of other players that are in his points band because he's going to put up a better, he's going to fill a couple of extra categories for you from just, I guess it's the fact that he has that high shot floor that you just are a very good strategy in terms of, shots correlating to points, to power play points, to goals, and, to assists as well. So I do think that Skinner's likely to slow down from the very recent torrid pace, and as exciting as that offensive explosion is, I do think that Skinner is a bit of a sell high opportunity right now. Looking at the Cupful ratings or rankings, I see that Skinner is ranked right around Rope Hintz and just above Kevin Fiala. And I would say I don't think it's shocking to say I'd be happy to cash in Skinner for either. If you could get Skinner for Fiala straight up, I think that's a great deal. But I'd also be happy to, maybe with Hintz, it might cost a depth piece to add to get in Hintz. But that might be something that, it feels like the owner or the other team is getting an upgrade elsewhere to kind of hold steady at that superstar level. And I think long-term Hintz and Fiala will both exceed Skinner's early season first quarter pace.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder too if you might kind of, drop a little poison in the ear of that Hintz owner about, his Band-Aid boy status and how, he can be a frustrating own sometimes. That might help your cause a little bit, although they might be onto you if you then offer them a trade not long after. I think the Fiala thing is interesting. Do you think that Kevin Fiala has another second half explosion in him now that he is with a new team? Could we still expect him to kind of get things going really strong in the latter half of the season in LA?
Yeah, I don't really see why he couldn't. I guess if I'm looking at the numbers so far, we've talked about Fiala a little bit, and I do have some concerns about, I guess, just that there have been ebbs and flows in the shot rate, but right now he's shooting a ton again. He's back up on the top unit. on the top power play and the top line with Kopitar and Kempe, I'm more than happy. I'm not too worried about Kevin Fiala. He's doing just fine so far, and as you know, he's already putting up a very solid early season pace. So yeah, I have no issues with. I'm not worried about Kevin Fiala. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think I might. I feel like I would be more interested in the straight up swap for Fiala than I would be adding a piece for Hintz. I do love having access to that power play. Maybe I'm just feeling. I accused Jason Robertson the other day of being very selfish with all of the unassisted goals that he's been getting lately. He's got to really let his pals in on the action there. So maybe that's coloring my opinion of a Hintz deal, perhaps. All right, I've got one more cold streak here that I want to talk about, and we'll get to a couple more as we go forward. But I wanted to mention Chandler Stephenson. You know, we talked about him on a ridiculous hot streak where he had 10 points over the course of 8 games, but could he be any colder? Stephenson has just 1 assist over the last 6 games, despite maintaining his outstanding line 1 power play 1 deployment with Eichel and Stone. And he, has regressed back to his anemic shooting ways, just 8 shots over that 6-game stretch. I get that he's lined up with some snipers, and obviously, his role is sort of to dish to them. But, it's not always super appealing when you're not getting the shots and you're not getting the scoring. He is at least providing some hits and blocks to avoid descending into that Rob Thomas zone of if he's not scoring, he's not doing anything for you. If you are holding Stephenson, I think you just got to hang on. There are some signs that we're going to see things start to improve. There's no sense in cutting bait on a guy with consistently great deployment, especially when a cold streak has sapped his value. He's just got 1 goal to show for his last 16 shots, nothing for his last 11. Jack Eichel has just 1 goal on his last 27 shots. Stone has been fine, but, we're talking about Stephenson's job basically is to feed Eichel, right? So once Eichel starts to even out and regress on his shooting, I think Chandler is going to at least be getting you some assists. So again, I think if you are the Stephenson owner, you got to hang in there. But if you are looking at a Stephenson owner who maybe is struggling to tread water in their league, why not float them an offer and see if they're sick of waiting around for that regression? Maybe think about offering Nick Paul, who's been red hot on line 2 and power play 2 for Tampa, with 5 points and 10 shots in the last 3 games prior to Tuesday night. And 16 points over the previous 16 games. So he's been a great addition in Tampa. And I thought he might be a guy, if you are looking at someone who needs to see some production now, and who has been putting together some shots in a way that Stephenson has not been, maybe that's something that you can dangle and, might be appealing for that Stephenson owner.
Yeah, I would definitely prefer Stephenson. It's tough to imagine. I think in most cases, people are probably getting Nick Paul off the waiver wire. And so it might just be a matter of waiting out Chandler Stephenson if the manager who's maybe frustrated with him at this point. But yeah, I always try to. I guess I struggle to see trades at that level, but if you're in a deep enough league, like it totally makes sense that you would you might have an opportunity to make that swap. So yeah, I think that's certainly one that I'd prefer to have Chandler Stephenson for the rest of the season if I had to pick. Lewis, we are going to talk about several more players that are on some interesting streaks, but first we have to take a very quick break. You're listening to Short Shifts. Welcome back to Short Shifts. Lewis, we are rolling on through our Trade Target Tuesday podcast. I'm going to...
we should have said that right from the outset.
Yeah, this is
a good one.
Masterclass in branding. Coming up with it halfway is actually really important and good.
I think it is very legitimately on brand for the pod, so I think it's perfect.
Yes, exactly. And we'll forget about it if we ever choose to do this same format again. So yeah, these are the sacrifices we have to make to keep us, like an obscure thing that our listeners can sort of glean useful advice from without their friends figuring us out, because we're just not organized enough to.
Gotta stay weird and indie.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Yeah, we're big proponents of the Keep Austin Weird movement. That's for sure. All right, I'll get into a cold streak, and this is a player we've talked about a couple times this year already. Hampus Lindholm over in Boston. 18 points in 21 games for a 70-point pace this year, but has now gone pointless for the last 4. When things were going well for Hampus, we were talking about how he was still worth a hold even after McAvoy came back. He still looked like he was an option on the top power play, and it looked like, even if the Bruins chose to keep a top 5 forward group on that top unit, Lindholm seemed like he was still outranking McAvoy in terms of power play time on ice. Looks like things are going back to the way we might have expected preseason. McAvoy is dominating the power play usage for defensemen. And what's interesting, I think, with Lindholm is when you do look into the numbers, there's this very troubling looking flashing sign for regression, which is his 9% shooting percentage. It's about 3 times too high for a defenseman. But it's really not that concerning to me in this case because we're talking about a player who has just 4 goals on the year anyway. So it's not like you're adding him or you're holding on to him because you're counting on him continuing to score. It's because you are hoping for some of those shots or some of those touches to turn into assists. So, if we're regressing the shooting percentage and we look at the fact that Lindholm is not likely to get too much more run on the top power play, I think that we're talking about a player who could still be a 55 to 60 point defenseman, assuming that the team in front of him continues to be as dominant as they've been. We're not talking about a defenseman that is putting up an incredible rate or an incredible pace and struggling to keep up with sustainable metrics, underlying metrics. We're talking about a defenseman who, for all intents and purposes, is looking pretty solid and pretty sustainable. So I don't think the gaudy point totals stick around, but I do think that we are looking at somebody who will finish, among the highest non-power play 1 point totals for defensemen. So if you're holding Lindholm, I'd be open to seeing if you can convince someone that, just because he still does have that 70-point pace, that you could take an underperforming early round defenseman off their hands, like maybe a Mo Seider could be poachable still, or even a Chris Letang, maybe a bit more realistic. I think what you would be hoping for in this case is getting like a package deal of 2 or 3 players going, and you're sort of sending Lindholm back in exchange for this defenseman, and then hoping that you're getting another upgrade elsewhere in the deal, or not giving up too much of a downgrade, because to me, I think that those 2 guys I just mentioned are nice upgrades. But if you're not able to find a D-man on the trade market who's putting up a 55-plus point pace, I really kind of want to preach caution with Lindholm. I don't think he's a terrible hold right now because he is continuing to see like 25 minutes a night. He's shooting and hitting a couple times a night anyway, and I think he's still going to put up really solid assist numbers. So playing for a great team, I think Hampus is a hold.
Yeah, and the short shifts bump is for real because he just got a power play 2 assist there for anybody who is hanging around with him. So good on you, Hampus. I love it when you're doing it and not just blasting me when I'm up against him. All right, well, another player that we want to talk about, this time on the hot side of the equation, but back on the blue line, is Justin Schultz. Had a bit of production very early in the season, and later went on a streak of 3 points in 13 games and hit waiver wires across the platforms. But if you've got the chance to grab him, your window to pick him up for a stream may be closing. He had 2 goals and 5 assists, including 2 power play assists in the last 5 games. But if you do pick him up, I do kind of want to preach some caution here. I don't think you should necessarily be grabbing him expecting that point parade to continue. It's just too much right now. Great if he keeps it going, but it could really fall off at any time. He's on power play too, although sometimes it can be hard to tell in Seattle. But he is seeing about 40% of the power play time on ice. And he still is shooting 3 times his even strength average from last year. At 8%, he's shooting hotter than any time in his career outside of his first 2 campaigns from 2012 to 2014 with Edmonton. And another red flag is his power play points participation, where he's way up at 71%, which would be his highest total over the course of 8 years. It may just be how important he is on his power play unit in Seattle. We don't really have any other data to compare him with since he's been part of the Kraken organization. But overall, I'm pretty cool on this hot streak. I would not be surprised to see him turn back into a pumpkin in short order, especially just Seattle has been kind of on a scoring bonanza lately that I also think is probably a little unsustainable. He's obviously been reaping the benefit from it, but I would imagine that starts to slow down a little bit too. I said this kind of jokingly, but, why not shoot your shot and offer him for Victor Hedman? This really is just a way for me to open the door to talk about Hedman. I know that he was covered on the Mega Show, but, this is a guy with 1 assist in the last 9 games and counting, as they are in the third period here on Thursday. He's on power play 2 while Mikhail Sergachev is just stunting all over everyone in his old spot. Maybe that Hedman owner is desperate enough to sell him for anyone who is doing something positive from power play too. I don't think that you'll really get a bite for this, and you may, in fact, insult the person that you're offering it to, but it did open the door to just talk about Hedman here a little bit. As a Hedman owner myself in Cupful, I am feeling a little bit of that desperation. I turned down an offer from Elon to trade Letang for Hedman. And at the time, I was sort of like, maybe he'll get his shot to be back on there. Now I'm starting to think it's either going to take an extended cold streak from Sergachev, which, is that really going to happen? Or an injury for him to get his opportunity back. So that's not a nice spot to be in, I suppose.
Yeah, in a way, you are the head man in tier 1 of the Cupful, and I would say you're not too close to Victor E.
Yes, those are both extremely true statements.
Would you actually trade Hedman for, you wouldn't trade him for Schultz? Yeah.
No, I wouldn't.
But I would describe that as trading Hedman for Schultz is like trading him for peanuts.
Right, yeah, because again, a guy who was widely available on waiver wires all over the place before this little outburst. So yeah, like I said, I wouldn't take that super seriously. I just sort of saw it as a way to crack the door open and get some Hedman talk in here for a second.
All right, Lewis, I'll tell you one more streak here for the show, and we're sticking around Seattle. We're sticking in the cold streaks, and we're sticking in Seattle, or returning to cold streak. And this is one that came from friend of the show, Ryan Downey, on the Keeping Karlsson patron-only Discord group. Ryan pointed out Seattle has scored 23 goals in the last 5 games, and Bjorkstrand has put up 1 goal and 1 assist in that span. Is it time to move on? Can we drop Oliver Bjorkstrand? Looking a bit further out, Bjorkstrand has 4 points in his last 9, pacing for just 43 points over a full season. If I'm being honest, I actually dropped Bjorkstrand in the Cupful last week. And as Ryan mentioned, it's been smooth sailing for me this week. I love dropping somebody who doesn't immediately go fuego. When I do look into OBJ's numbers, there are 2 things that sort of jump out to me. The first is he is averaging nearly 3 shots per game this year, and he's only scoring on 3% of those chances. So that will go up. Bjorkstrand is a career 12% shooter. And I think that he has a lot of potential on that front. We've seen that he can be a useful contributor, both in real life and in fantasy, even from, a middle 6 role. So I don't think that this is something where Bjorkstrand is necessarily, I don't think we necessarily have to leave him for dead. But also I think at this moment, he is definitely a snoozer, really not getting any opportunity to shine in Seattle, averaging less than 16 minutes a game, which is the lowest he's seen since he broke out in 2019-20. And he's only played in 12 minutes 4 of the last 5 games. So, when you're looking at a player who's ice cold, getting bottom 6 ice time and power play 2 opportunity, not really a player that I'm holding in hopes of finding a trade, unfortunately. If you find someone offering anything, I think I'm okay to take that for Bjorkstrand. It's just, to me, he is a drop. But yes, if you are a trade king like our good pal Cousin Dave, go forth and find yourself something for OBJ. But I think for those of us in 10, 12, and even 14 team leagues at this point, you're better off cutting bait rather than holding on in hopes of finding something. And, if he does move back up the roster, I don't think that anything is set in stone in Seattle. I think you could, I think he's worth keeping an eye on, keeping on that watch list. But for now, I'm not really holding out hope of Bjorkstrand suddenly turning things around, which I do also feel like is the cue for him to score 4 in the next game. But anyway, short of the anti-jinx, that is my true advice when it comes to OBJ.
Yeah, keeping that eye out, I think, for a change in situation, I think is really good because I do love the shots. That's something that's always been really appealing about him. And like you said, he's due for some regression, but it's going to take a move up the lineup before I'm going to be confident that he's really going to be able to be more productive than we've seen from him with this current deployment. Like it seems like the natural result of kind of being down in the depths of the Kraken lineup.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not Kraken over in Seattle. Well, for one player. Everyone else is doing fine. All right, Lewis. That's all the time that we have for tonight. I want to thank everyone who tuned in on Twitch, twitch.tv/KeepingKarlsson. Follow us over there. We're having a great time. Lewis is decked out with several of our favorite all-time Pokemon. Lewis, it was great to see you again after we had a bit of time apart last week, and I'm just very happy to be back in the booth and looking forward to another week of shows with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is going to be my first Thursday show in a couple weeks when it comes around. So very much looking forward to it. Always a pleasure to get to chat with you, talk some fantasy hockey. Best of luck in your week, and we'll do it all again in a couple days. Thanks so much for joining us. Please be sure to give us a follow at Short Shifts KK. You can, of course, find Brian and Elon at Keeping Karlsson. Dave Benton of the Stream Scheme is at NHL Stream Scheme. Also recommend you follow at Game Day Lines, at Game Day Goalies, and at Game Day News NHL, all organized so nicely at the site GameDayLineTweets.com. Visit that site and the other great sites we use to research our episodes at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach. John Reed is our digital media producer. And until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.